You're listening to the Valley Current.
Welcome in, Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. Good to be back with you. As I mentioned before, we're getting thousands and thousands of downloads, and we are back doing at least one podcast a week, and going to likely do more. And so we wanted to talk about a landmark decision today. I'm here with my friend and expert, longtime attorney, Jack Russo, who we've been discussing this topic, Jack, for 10 years now?
Well, you were the brainchild around technology is going to streamline all this stuff, and there's no way that you can justify all of these costs of a real estate transaction, and you listed them from A through Z. You targeted a few of them, but we always noted the real estate commission was kind of the tail that was wagging the dog. Right. It's such a high percentage. And there was major class action litigation that resulted in a major victory against the National Association of Realtors. And they have now agreed to pay like $448 million in 4 annual installments or some number of installments over 4 years.
Yeah.
And to make a number of systemic changes, which proves, I guess, to some degree that these class action cases do work, even though a lot of people think that class action lawyers have a bit of a racket themselves. We'll save that for another podcast. But this is like technology really did change things, and yet the industry didn't really change with it, and pricing remained pretty much locked at either 6, or then they sort of dropped it to 5, but pretty much it was hard to get it below 5% generally, right?
Right. Yeah, it's been a long time coming, and just to give the listeners a little bit of history behind this is a lot of people don't know, and it was surprising to me when I found this out 6 or 7 years ago, is that the National Association of Realtors, I think the last I checked, they're number 2 or 3 in the most money spent in lobbying the government and our legislators. And so, believe it or not, the last I saw, Jack, on an annual basis, they spend more than the pharmaceutical industry. So that should give you a little idea of how they're really protecting their people over the years in lobbying. And by the way, I'll just say notably too, which doesn't have anything to do with this, but that was one of the reasons real estate agents were able to stay 1099, because most of us know the IRS would like to see everybody go W-2.
Well, they did a lot of things. I think they would say, to their benefit, that they kept the industry from lots of law changes that would have dramatically changed the industry, including many tax law changes, such as the deductibility of a certain amount of interest, which Congress has repeatedly attempted to whittle back on, the 1031 exchange, tax-free exchange provisions that have been under all sorts of attempted attacks have been fought against. I mean, I'm sure they have a big legislative agenda that they spend that money across. What they didn't realize is technology was going to radically change the way in which housing gets sold, because it's so much more of an electronic marketing approach than it is the old traditional style approach, which, used to be mainly like word of mouth and newspapers, and people circulating pieces of paper around, and often even sending out mailers where they would send postcards. I think some old school people still do that, but it's actually pretty rare. Everything now is basically an online approach, right?
Yeah. Well, I think what's going to happen now is this really just, is going to come into play for real for the first time. There's been talk about it. So now we'll probably see over the next several months and within the next year how the industry will respond to this. My guess is, we were talking a little bit before we started this podcast, there'll probably be startups that will be geared primarily just to go after the buy side. It appears that the buy side is the one that's going to be the most challenging for this new model and format. So we'll get a better look at that. But I could tell you that the industry is nervous already. And this is really, my guess is too, if I'm not mistaken, there's hundreds of kind of what we call copycat lawsuits throughout the nation as well, right?
Well, and that's the question. What did they get out of the settlement? Did they get some relief from all the other cases, or are they only getting some payment schedule relief on this case? Because at some point, I think the association itself just runs out of money. Like if you say that there's 20 other cases around the nation and they could result in the $500 million outcome that occurred in this one case, which I think was tried in St. Louis and Missouri and covered 2 or 3 states in and around Missouri. We have 50 states in this nation. Real estate gets sold in all 50 states. California is probably the biggest. New York after that in terms of both volume and dollar size. I mean, those are elephant cases if they go forward. I don't know if the association has enough insurance. I kind of doubt it. But it'll be interesting to see what this does from a generalized point of view, because maybe their changes were long overdue and they can get some relief now in negotiations with those other geographies. But by and large, the association can't claw back money that they never really had. The commissions were paid out through various firm members. So it's a little bit like the association was viewed as the organization that managed the conspiracy. The view is they were conspiring to fix prices, and they were enabling the price fixing. Now, the question is the next level of this to actually attack the individual firms, the large firms that participated in the price fixing?
I think one level down? I do think you're right. So what I'm hearing is that there is some concern that this will trickle down and affect the larger firms. I mean, first of all, the National Association of Real Estate paid out this fine, but the thought is, to your point, is that this will trickle down now and affect, the big players like EXP and Coldwell Banker, who I think their parent company is Realogy, and then you have Century 21, and we can go on Keller Williams, some of the big players. Now, will this land on their doorstep? And I already know that those margins have to be pretty thin with those companies as well. So this will be, will it create more consolidation? Will it make them quickly learn how to work smarter and more effective and cost effective? I don't know. We'll see how this plays out.
Well, and what does it do in terms of the systemic changes? They will certainly send out all sorts of notices to their members that you're not to retaliate against a broker that decides to negotiate down to a 1% commission. I mean, obviously a member can say, I'm not going to work for 0.5% if the total commission is 1%. There is some point where you'd say, maybe the whole way this is going to change is to more of a hourly rate. You hire your broker for the number of hours he or she works, but we all know most real estate brokers don't work that many hours. The reality is they leverage technology and they leverage all sorts of approaches to amplify really getting the client. It turns out to be getting the listing turns out to often be the biggest value add that a particular rainmaker brings to an account or brings to an agency. And I think that's going to probably change to some degree. And how the payments work will change. I mean, they have to be thinking inside those big firms, what do we do to make this more reasonable so we don't see continued litigation about some alternative form of price fixing? But the industry as a whole is taking a lot of dollars out of transactions. We know that, right?
Yeah, it could be a number of different things. And so I thought today, we're a little bit on time. We could talk a little bit how the industry might be affected. Then maybe next week, I think we could address a little bit how the consumer may be affected by this change. The industry is definitely going to have to make some changes. I do see one of the things I think that you'll see right away, which won't set well, but the reality is the industry may do some sweeping, comprehensive commission changes themselves, just knowing that this is coming, right? I mean, real estate agents, I think, I could get this wrong, but I'm pretty sure they make somewhere Jack, between about 80 to 90% of the commission that comes through the door. So let's say $10,000 comes through the door at a large firm. The real estate agent makes about, 8 or 9,000 of that. Now the agency collects desk fees and technology fees and these other things that, accumulate some revenue for them, but they're already working on pretty slim margins, and the agents are collecting most of the commission. So maybe it's a proposed pay cut across the board, which will be interesting to see how that goes.
In the U.S., right?
Right.
California real estate is probably 2 to 3x whatever the U.S. average is. California, New York City, like basically places where real estate values have really gone up. Silicon Valley being one of them. So agents in Silicon Valley do quite well compared to, say, agents in Peoria, Illinois, or agents in Kansas City. They're just not making the same kind of money.
Right.
At the same time, I suppose the cost of actually marketing a property in California probably is higher, although electronically it should be the same cost. A lot of what you could say goes on is a house gets listed on multiple listing. From this multiple listing, it almost automatically, and I think it probably does automatically go on Zillow. And Zillow and maybe 2 or 3 other sites are where people go first, right? So then you have to ask, well, why wouldn't the next step be press a button and say, I want to put an offer on this property? And then an AI tool just automatically generates the offer. Where's the cost in that? Like, where's the actual real estate professional doing anything in that context? The form is preset. The offer is really determined by the potential buyer, maybe some advice, an hour's worth of advice about how to structure the offer. And then it all gets automatically sent. So, we see technology essentially taking out a lot of the functionality that's been carried out by the agent or broker. And so I don't know how people can calculate big numbers around that. Now, maybe the way they do it is they offer up, well, I did the drone photography and you didn't do the drone photography, or I did the staging, you didn't do the staging. We know some agents and brokers do cosmetic painting, and they'll do some construction work even. They hold open houses, although I'm told open houses don't sell houses. I read that somewhere, that open houses are just nice things because they make the client feel good, but it's not really the way a house gets sold. I don't know what your inside knowledge is on that.
Well, people are still very visual, so I don't know. I'm mixed a little bit. I think that there's something to staging a house properly. However, I will say in general, in a market environment that we are today, and the kind of global economy and the access to homes and information, I still think what sells a home is, its location, that its potential, lot size, all the schools, right? The things that people know immediately. And most people could have a vision, even if it needs some work, or you could add on, or usually it's been my experience that when homes are staged properly, they sell quicker and for a little more money. People are still very visual, if I should say, for most people. Now, if you have a creative person that comes in and they don't care what the house looks like, but they have the ability to look at it and say, I could add a room here, and I could add this here, and I could add that here, then maybe it's not so, maybe it's not so important to someone like that.
There definitely are buyers that are more into aesthetics. And then there are buyers who are more, this is the location, I can fix whatever's broken. And then there are economic buyers. Hey, this is underpriced and the dirt is worth more. I can knock the place down and start over again. I think there's all sorts of buyers across those 3 different types, probably many more than that. By and large, I would say that most people, most of the time, if they bought a property before, they tend to have more of an economic analysis of it. First-time buyer, probably it's a more romantic analysis of what are we buying and what are we getting, and are the schools right, and so on. I'm kind of curious, what does it mean for the lending side of things? Does that get implicated here? Where it
It's
starts
interesting.
to become
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, and we'll talk more about it next week. But I think there are some people in the real estate industry that think that the lenders should step up and do something. Now, what that means, I don't know, but there is a lot of talk around the industry right now of, but again, on the buy side, lending, most people do borrow money. Now, some people do pay cash initially, but most people still historically borrow money to purchase a home. So there is I think the real estate industry is starting to see if they could get the lenders involved to see if they could get some skin in the game on this transaction, if that makes sense. So I think all kinds of solutions or potential solutions are being bantered around right now.
I mean, when you look at the work you do, you have a lot of inside knowledge about how people can best position themselves to get the best loan at the best rate. That's knowledge you've accumulated over decades.
Right.
You can't necessarily automate that. I think there are some people that think, but usually it's much more of a personal relationship and teasing out where the applicant can improve their presentation. And I don't know if it's an automated system can do that. I mean, obviously, in the marginal case, you could put someone over the goal line that may not be able to get over the goal line on their own. But I've always been wondering why the real estate profession as a whole has been sort of not that savvy about maybe up front getting someone like you involved with a potential buyer right from the get-go to figure out, well, how much can you afford and how much are you going to be able to borrow even before you get into start looking at properties that are out of your league. Like, I'm sure people waste a lot of time looking at properties that they just really can't possibly borrow the amount of money that it would take to close the deal, right?
Well, there's a lot of talk about what the partnerships could mean. For instance, in a typical real estate transaction, you have three major players. You have the real estate side, the lending side, and then likely the title, insurance, escrow side. There are other little incremental parts like appraisers, things like that, but that really there's not really any substantial gain there. But the three industries that stand to gain the most income and revenue from a real estate transaction are the real estate company, the lender, and the title and escrow. So you could see some plays together with them. Maybe I've always been a big fan of partnerships. Maybe you get industries. I'll just throw this out as just an idea. The Home Depots of the world, or anybody that's home related that could benefit from a transaction. Maybe they have some skin in the game. I could think of all kinds of creative ways to get some of this thing paid for. And the other thing I'll say, which could affect the lending, not so much here, but I'm starting to hear rumbles about, and I would think we may see this for the first time in I don't know how many years, is there is talk about the 100-year mortgage, Jack.
What?
The 100-year mortgage, instead of amortized for 30 years, amortized for 100. And then it's transferable.
Oh, so this is a little bit like you pay a much lesser sum over a much longer period, and then your kids, grandkids, and so on can decide if they want to continue to pay.
Yeah. Now, what it also does is brings in a whole new level of buyers that wouldn't be able to qualify for a 30-year mortgage, but they could qualify for a 50 or 100-year mortgage. You can imagine, right?
Wow, that's quite a statement. It would take some getting used to. I mean, I know in the UK, a lot of times the land is not sold, but there's like a 99-year lease that's put on the land, and even that a lot of people wince at because they say, well, you're really not buying. You're buying like a timeshare. You're really not buying a forever property. But the truth is, most people flip their properties. Not flip is the wrong word. They transact their properties over less than 6 or 7 years, and it's probably getting shorter as we see more work moving around world. People are now able to work almost anywhere, at least in the knowledge industries. And so I think we're going to continue to see people move real estate around the board with more transactions happening over shorter periods of time. Yeah. And so you may have, I mean, it'd be an interesting thing to calculate, like how many pieces of real estate. My parents, I could probably count on one hand the number of residences they had over the 90-year lifetimes that they enjoyed. 70 of which, or 60 something of which, they were married and they had a household. It's a small number. Basically, they lived one place for most of their adult life, and then they eventually retired, and they lived in this other place for most of the rest of their retirement life. I don't think those numbers are going to continue. I think the numbers are going to get much larger as people move, downsize, upsize, do a bunch of stuff over time. Probably will go 10 times the number of places. Now, whether that means that you buy or you rent is a whole nother question.
Right. Well, as we wrap up here, just a reminder for those that want more information, you can reach me at 408-838-9060 or email joe@reradiolive.com. That's joe@reradiolive.com. Also, Jack, give us a minute. Give the listeners that most of them that tune in, but anybody that's tuning in new, a little bit about your firm and how you could help people and how they could reach you.
Right. We don't do class action cases involving real estate. We wish we did this one because it's quite a big payday that those class action lawyers received. And I'm sure that's going to be an interesting case study for the books down the road. But we do a lot of business litigation, a lot of litigation. We just finished a real estate litigation problem very successfully for a client who called us at the last minute asking for help. But you can reach us directly by phone at 650-327-9800. The website is www.computerlaw.com, one word, computerlaw.com. And I'm Jay Russo, JRUSSO at computerlaw.com. Thanks, Joe, for the time.
You guys practice not only in California, but Florida, a handful of states, right?
Right. We're licensed in like 8 different states and nationally in the federal system. So we do cases all over the United States. We actually help a lot of clients internationally as well. And there are a lot of international players that believe very much in U.S. real estate. And then they get into a problem, we sometimes get calls as well. Because they really just want some people that will be responsive, help them, and then refer them, if necessary, to the right folks. Right. Obviously, this case today that we're discussing is the major milestone litigation that will have some dramatic effects. What those effects will turn out to be, something we'll continue to watch. Sure. Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks again, Jack. We'll catch up with you again next week. All right.
Take care.
All right. Take care. Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. Thanks to Jack Russo for jumping in. His legal expertise is always a huge benefit for our show. We have been friends with Jack Russo for over 30 plus years and love the fact that he can offer his expertise on all these different legal issues and much, much more. All right. For more information, joe@reradiolive.com. That is joe@reradiolive.com.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.